Hi, I'm Chuckie Thomas, and I am the ADHD Screenwriter. And in this episode, I'm going to catch you up on my ADHD journey. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Again, I'm Chuckie Thomas, and I am the ADHD Screenwriter. Please make sure to like and subscribe, smash the bell, that kind of stuff. Comment below. I want to hear from you. To recap real quick before we get into the episode, episode 2, I talked all about my ADHD journey. So I had gotten to the point where maybe it was brain damage. Who knows what was going on? I had seen a psychiatrist, a really good one, for the first time, and gotten some things going, got some bipolar medicine, taking some stuff, getting things under control, and I was looking forward to getting a future diagnosis. So now I want to catch you up to where I am now. So I'm going through this to maybe help some people, especially adults like me in my 40s, now just getting diagnosed with this stuff. Maybe it's going to help you with your own journey, right? So back to the whole brain injury thing. My psychiatrist wanted me to go to the neurologist, so I scheduled an appointment. And I went to the neurologist. She was very nice, and she wanted to do an MRI. Well, I got home, and I called up the MRI people, and it was going to be $1,000. And I said, I do not have this is with insurance. I do not have $1,000 just laying around. So I just, like a lot of ADHD people, I said, I'm just going to ignore that and pretend it didn't exist. And kept going along and talked to my psychiatrist again and said, look, I really don't have this much money. Can we just schedule an ADHD test? And she said, all right, we'll schedule the test. It will be several months, but we'll go ahead and schedule it and get it underway. Well, in the meantime, I went back to the neurologist while I was waiting for this test because, well, I had to get my migraine medicine because they moved it over there. So sheepishly, I went back to the neurologist and she said, hey, what happened with that MRI test? And I said, it was $1,000. She said, oh, okay, I see. How about we try an EKG test? And I said, okay. And well, I didn't really follow up on how much that was going to cost. Guess how much it cost? That cost even more money. So that really worked out really well and it was completely ridiculous. However, if you've never got an EKG before, it's pretty intense. I mean, they flash stuff right in your face over and over, and then they have you close your eyes, and they do it even faster and faster and faster. And you would think it's not hard to sit there with your eyes closed with light in front of your face because your eyes are closed. Well, you would be wrong because it's really tough. It was crazy. So the good news is I don't have a brain injury, so I don't have to change the title of the channel to The Brain Injured Screenwriter. So good news, I guess. The reason my psychiatrist wanted me to get the brain scan stuff is because, well, I had some adverse reactions to some medicine, particularly Prozac that my first psychiatrist prescribed me. Made me have a manic phase for a while, and it wasn't great. Apparently people with bipolar disorder, this happens to them with certain medicines like Prozac, which I found out the hard way. So she wanted to take things slow, which I understood. So we got that out of the way. So meanwhile, we were trying to figure out my medicine with bipolar disorder, right? To really get that under control. You know, it went from kind of like this to maybe like this. There's still some up and downs, but not as severe. So that was getting good. However, we went a little too far at one point, and I was sleeping probably like 10 to 12 hours a day. And when I woke up, I was not awake. I was not fully awake, and I never got fully awake. And I said, well, this is a little bit too much. So we had to scale some of them down, which had the risk of bringing some of the depression and anxiety back. But maybe a little bit of that is worth not sleeping 12 hours and being exhausted all the time. So she ended up also prescribing me Lexapro for anxiety to deal with the fact that I had to scale back my bipolar disorder stuff, and that's kind of helped to take some of the edge off, you know, some of the sharper edges of anxiety. However, again, she upped it to 10 from 5 milligrams, and guess what happened? I just started sleeping like crazy again. So Apparently my reaction to a lot of medicine, I found out, is just to sleep, which, it's great. The whole reason I started this in the beginning, if you watched episode 2, was because I wasn't sleeping. Now I'm sleeping too much. Life is just up and down, right? But anyway, we went back down to 5, again with the risk of maybe some of those up and downs happening, but it's worth it to be able to wake up in the morning and just not have that fog over my head. So I feel like I'm in a pretty good place with that. And so up now, get to talk about the ADHD test. So the fun thing about taking an ADHD test as an adult is that it's at the Children's Hospital. So I went to the waiting room and there's a bunch of toys and coloring books, which I didn't color, but I really wanted to. But I just waited there in the waiting room. For some reason, they had to schedule at 8 in the morning. Originally, it was scheduled at like 1 in the afternoon, I think. And I thought, that's fine. It's at least an hour and a half away. But then they changed it to 8 in the morning for some reason. I still don't know why. So I stayed at a friend's house who luckily lives near that hospital. So thanks to Jeff for letting me, and Chris for letting me crash there. Anyway, I get to the waiting room, check in, and immediately I'm thinking, I bet they're just gonna look at everything that I'm doing. Like, this is gonna be me under a microscope, because they're checking me for everything. This is actually an ADHD, autism, everything test. They're really gonna put me through the works here. So already I'm self-conscious. They pull me back, and this very nice lady pulls me into the office, and we get to work. Now, if you've never taken one of these things, it's hard to describe. And it's not like I'm spoiling anything if you've got one of yours coming up, because there's nothing you can do to really prepare. It's just test after test after test. And again, a lot of this stuff is for kids, because that's the focus of ADHD tests, is for kids to try and catch it early, which is great. So there's a lot of working with shapes and remembering a lot of words, and then trying to recall those words about 350 times during the test, and then learning a whole bunch of new words and trying to remember those words as well as the first words, which all sounds very simple until you're in the room and you're doing it for I think it was there for 5 hours. I mean, it was intense. There was a fun part where I got to tell a story about some flying frogs, and that was a lot of fun. And I get what that was for. Is some people have trouble with, because it didn't make sense, right? Like, frogs don't fly. So that was kind of the test for that. But as a storyteller, I was like, yay, here we go. So I woke up a little bit. And there's also some beep tests where they play a tone and you're supposed to react. And since I've been playing so many video games my entire life, I try to change it into a video game form. Maybe that wasn't the best, and maybe I did too well on that because of that, but whatever. So it was just a lot. It was a lot, and then I took, I think, at least 3 or 4 not written exams, but basically seeing where I was mentally, have you ever thought about killing yourself? No. Do you like going to parties? Not really. What do you do when you go to a party? Do you talk to people? Not really. That kind of stuff. Like a million questions about that. Have you ever been abused? Yes. That just test after test of that kind of thing. Again, they put you through the ringer so they can also watch you. And that's another thing I want to talk about here, is that they were obviously watching me. There might have been a camera on the computer I was using, I'm not sure, but the lady who was administering the test was watching me the whole time, and my reactions and how I interacted with her, how I interacted with myself. At one point I was talking to myself because that's what I do, and it was on the report. So what everything I said to myself that I wasn't sure if she heard me. She did. That showed up. So it was interesting being maybe like a cell under a microscope for a while, and just knowing that's what was going to happen. So I finished the test, and I went and sat in my car, and I thought about having lunch, but all I could do was stare out the windshield and think, I have to drive home now. I have to drive an hour and a half home, and my brain is literally melting out of my ears. How am I supposed to do anything? So I just kind of sat there for a while, and finally I drove home, took a little nap, and tried to collect myself after what just happened and wait on the results. So it took a few weeks, but I got an update from my new psychiatrist that was specifically there to analyze the results from the test. This is a brand new psychiatrist. Very nice guy. Talked very, very fast. It's obviously he's done this a lot. So it was online on Zoom or whatever. So it was just, he's done this a million times. It was like, let's get through this. And we went through my results, which was very long. It was a lot. And it's weird because it also included like my family history and stuff. Like my parents' divorce, all that kind of stuff. So it's weird hearing yourself be talked about in almost like a third person, like Chuck did this and this and this and this. This happened to him, this thing. A little weird. But I got over it because I was here for the diagnosis. And as he was talking, I could tell that a lot of the stuff that normally would show up in a test, maybe for a kid, was not showing up for me as an adult because I made it to adulthood safe and sound for the most part, didn't go to jail and didn't drive my car off a bridge or something to feel something for the first time or whatever. Sometimes it happens to ADHD people because sometimes they just don't make it because they don't get noticed. They don't get diagnosed and they don't get helped. They slip through the cracks, which is basically what happened to me. Somehow I made it to my mid-40s. Here I am hearing it from this guy, reading my life story. And he's going through the results, and I was just picking up stuff like, Chuck doesn't show these signs. I'm like, I kind of do if I let myself go, if I sometimes leave clothes piles around, but I'm pretty good about picking stuff up. My wife would probably disagree, but doing the dishes, stuff like that, which is normally tough for people. I've just learned how to physically make myself do it because I've just had to. And it was a little frustrating. I'll be honest, it was a little frustrating to hear someone talk about it and knowing what's going on in my head with my 30 thoughts and my music and stuff. But all he can do is view things from the scientific perspective, which I got. Anyway, we're going through it. And I see at the bottom, we're getting closer to the diagnosis, and my heart's going crazy. I'm like, I know what's coming. And sure enough, I get to the bottom, and it just says bipolar 2. And I went, son of a gun. However, as we get down there, we get to the very bottom, he goes, enter, ADHD, mild. And I went, oh, there it is. There's my second diagnosis. He says it's mild, but it doesn't matter. He said, as I was reading this over, I realized, yes, I think you've got ADHD. On some level, there's some inattentiveness. I don't know. It's coming through differently. Like I said, as an adult, it came through differently as some of the kids he's seen. But as he was reading it, he realized, okay, there's something here. There's something that the initial diagnosis as we went through, we just didn't get. So I got my diagnosis. So that means I get to have medicine. So I'm going to talk about that next because that's also been an interesting journey. So I went back to my psychiatrist, Dr. Lee, and we talked over everything. And again, she's very cautious about medicine because of my past, and I totally get that, and I really appreciate that. The first thing we wanted to try were non-stimulants, which again I get, because she's very worried about sending me to a mental hospital or whatever, which I would rather not do. So she's tried Strattera first, and let's just say I had some interesting side effects, both physically and mentally from it, that I was not expecting. Maybe she could have warned me about. But luckily there was stuff online that helped me out, that I realized this was side effects from the medicine and not just my body going insane. The worst part is that it really just didn't seem to work. On some days it would calm me down and I would feel kind of like chill, and other days, especially the very first day I took it, I felt like my skin was on fire and I was going insane and my anxiety was about to blow through the top of my head like a cartoon. And there was no telling what day today was going to happen. my brain didn't calm down. The music was still there. And in fact, I think the music got louder in my head. And in fact, my dreams got more intense and the music started showing up in my dreams, like going to concerts and stuff, or singing a song in the car in a dream or something. Like it showed up way more than usual. So I don't know, Strattera, it just wasn't working. So I recently stopped that. Next up has been Wellbutrin. And she said that supposedly it's mainly for depression and anxiety, but it also can work for ADHD. I did not know this, actually. I thought it was just I've just heard it for depression and stuff, like on commercials or whatever. But she says it's for ADHD. I honestly, I just started taking it, so I don't want to even say anything yet. I haven't felt any different yet, but it's like day 4, so that doesn't count. As a person with ADHD, as you probably are, you understand, day 1, I want it to work. And if it doesn't work, I'm like, this is useless. This isn't working. I know now, like, you got to calm down and let things like settle in and your body to change and that kind of stuff. Frustrating, I know, but you got to let it work. But I'll have another update on that, because if this doesn't work, then it's stimulants time, and I'll either be updating you or I will be in the psych ward with some grippy socks, and maybe I could record from there. I don't know. We'll see. So if you couldn't tell, it's been a lot, and I've learned a lot. As I mentioned, it's a little weird as an adult with ADHD being kind of poked and prodded and knowing that I made it this far, honestly, just by pure luck. I count myself so lucky. I have so many friends that I've come to understand a lot of people with ADHD have trouble with. As I mentioned, going to like parties and meeting other people is tough for anybody, but people with ADHD can be extremely tough. And I've been so lucky to have so many cool people in my life. And I have an amazing wife, like I'm good with my family, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I fell in love with writing. I found my thing, and that it's something that hits dopamine in my brain a lot of people can't get. Just super lucky. But what I've really learned is just, if you don't have this thing going on, it's hard to see. Like, as the psychiatrist was going through my diagnosis, I was just like, man, if you could just open my brain up and see all the nonsense and the circus going on, I could just show you, and then you'll know I have ADHD. But obviously you can't do that, and they just have to go off of what they know. And that's not everything. Even doctors don't quite 100% understand what is going on in our ADHD brains, right? Because they don't have that thing. And if you don't have it, how are you supposed to 100% relate to it? You can't. You can only hope to understand it. And luckily, my psychiatrist was able to see in my diagnosis, like, there's enough there, so I can get some help. But it makes me really wonder about other adults who maybe have done these tests thinking that, oh, there's something wrong. Maybe I've got ADHD. And my first ever psychiatrist just laughed at me. But I was strong enough to say, screw you, I'm going somewhere else and getting some actual help. And now I've got some good psychiatrists on my side. Other people might not be so lucky, and they just run into a brick wall like I did the first one, and that's it. And they're still struggling. So there's a lot, there's a lot of education. Obviously, there's a lot of misinformation going on, especially right now, about these kind of mental disorders and everything. So if you're out there watching this and you think you're not diagnosed yet or something, and you're thinking, I just know there's something going on, keep going. Don't self-diagnose. Again, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying go online and try and find some drugs on the black market, start taking stuff. Don't do that. Go to doctors, go to trusted psychiatrists. I'm just saying they don't have all the answers because they don't have your brain. So get a second opinion, get a third opinion, go see smart people, and it can only help to get more opinions. And eventually you might find somebody who can actually understand you. So what's in store for the future for me? Part of that diagnosis actually mentioned that there's some mild chance for social autism, which kind of makes sense, but that's something I'm going to have to really look into in the future. I'm going to get this figured out first and then maybe move on to that. But it makes sense. I mean, I don't like making phone calls, but who does?
Don't do it! Don't do it!
Anyway, that's the episode. That's an update on my crazy brain and where I'm at. I'm glad I don't have to change the name of the channel to the Brain Damaged Screenwriter, which I still think it would make sense. But it's been very interesting, and I hope you found it helpful. And if you did, please like and subscribe, smash the bell for alerts, blah, 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 do all that stuff. Comment below. I want to hear about your ADHD journey. If you've gotten these diagnoses, that you went through this crazy battery of tests like I did, I want to hear about your experience so that we can at least commiserate over it. It was insane. And as always, as I always close these out, if you're using these videos to disassociate and not write because you have ADHD or whatever else is going on, and you know you are, why don't you come back after you write and then watch more videos? I'll see you next time. Still think it would make sense, but but it's been very interesting.